it talks, let's take a look. Life and hope in every book.
Today, we're embarking on, well, a truly profound journey. We're diving into one of the most enigmatic and, frankly, just fascinating books ever written, Ecclesiastes. If you've ever felt like life is a bit of a hamster wheel, full of striving, lots of effort, but maybe lacking that ultimate meaning, then this ancient text, believe it or not, is probably going to speak to you in a surprisingly modern voice. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to unpack the core wisdom inside Ecclesiastes. We want to see what essential, maybe actionable nuggets of knowledge it offers for us living right now in the complex, often overwhelming tapestry of the modern world. How can we navigate things like ambition, finding satisfaction, handling the inevitable ups and downs, when a book written literally thousands of years ago starts with such a bleak pronouncement?
It is a powerful start, isn't it? Ecclesiastes, often attributed to the teacher or Koheleth, it just immediately grabs you with this really stark, provocative statement: futile, futile, absolutely futile. Everything is futile. And this isn't just some casual dismissal. The original Hebrew, hevel havelim, it's like the strongest possible way to express it. Think of holy of holies, meaning the most holy place. This is like futility of futilities, the absolute ultimate futility. It sets this almost confrontational tone, for deep exploration into meaning, purpose, and really the core of the human condition. The book fundamentally asks, what truly brings satisfaction? Or maybe, does anything ultimately bring satisfaction, as Koheleth puts it, under the sun?
That's a really bold way to kick off a philosophical discussion. So when we dive into a text this ancient, this profound, what kind of sources are we actually pulling from to give us these insights? Where is this info coming from?
Good question. We're drawing directly from the biblical text itself, specifically the book of Ecclesiastes. But, and this is key, we're also relying really heavily on rich academic notes. These clarify all sorts of things: linguistic nuances, historical context, the meaning of key Hebrew terms, figures of speech. These notes are incredibly valuable because they help illuminate how the original audience would likely have understood Koheleth, often challenging and, let's be honest, sometimes countercultural observations. They help us bridge those millennia to try and grasp the essence of his thought.
All right, I'm ready. Let's really unpack this journey into ancient wisdom and see what it actually means for our contemporary lives right now. The pervasive theme of futility, hevel, and life's repetitive cycles.
Yeah.
So like you said, the very first word that just jumps out, almost screams out from Ecclesiastes is futile, or that phrase, futility of futilities.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds incredibly bleak, almost existentially depressing. But what exactly does this word hevel truly mean? Is it just about things being worthless, pointless, or is there more to it?
That's a critical question, absolutely. And understanding its nuances is, it's really crucial for grasping Koheleth's entire message. Hevel literally translates to breath or vapor, maybe even wind. Think about trying to catch the wind in your hands. It's there, you feel it, but it's unsubstantial, it's fleeting, impossible to actually grasp or hold on to. And when it's used in that superlative form, hevel, havelim, it means the most outstanding example of futility, the ultimate vapor, the most fleeting thing imaginable. But here's the key insight for us, I think. Hevel isn't always worthless in the sense of having zero value. Instead, it often means something more like profitless or maybe without lasting effect. So something can be momentarily enjoyable, or incredibly useful or seem really significant in the short term. But if it doesn't offer enduring meaning or ultimate satisfaction or some kind of everlasting impact, Koheleth slaps that label on it, hevel. It's a fundamental distinction for how we view our own pursuits today, isn't it? That fleeting feeling of accomplishment or pleasure. Maybe it's just a vapor.
Wow, okay. That distinction changes things quite a bit. It's not necessarily that things are bad, but maybe just about their ultimate stickiness or, their lack of stickiness. Now, who is this teacher, this Koheleth, making such grand, almost unsettling pronouncements? Tradition often points to King Solomon, right, given his reputation for wisdom and, massive wealth. Does the text itself back that up?
Well, the text certainly presents a persona that fits Solomon perfectly.
Yeah.
He introduces himself as son of David, king in Jerusalem, and then later, chapter 1, verse 12, he specifies king over Israel in Jerusalem. As you read on, the description aligns precisely with what we know, or think we know, about Solomon from other historical accounts. He's painted as a figure of immense wisdom. It says so right in 1.13 and 16. Staggering wealth, like you said, 2.8. A vast number of servants, 2.7. Grand architectural projects, agricultural stuff, 2.46. And he's described as someone who was a prolific collector and writer of proverbs, like in 12.910, so the narrative persona. It's undeniably that of a wise, powerful king, just like Solomon. Now, while the text clearly presents itself this way, the academic notes we're using, they do highlight a significant scholarly debate, it's worth mentioning. Some scholars argue against Solomon actually being the author. They point to certain linguistic features, things in the Hebrew, that they see as maybe characteristic of a later period. For example, there's a specific relative pronoun she that's used a lot instead of the more common asher. Some see that as a sign of later Hebrew, but other scholars push back. They argue it could simply be a dialectical difference, maybe a northern versus a southern thing, rather than strictly meaning it was written later. So while the tradition points strongly to Solomon, the precise historical author, it remains a subject of, well, thoughtful academic discussion. But for our purposes today, what really matters is the persona Koheleth embodies, that of this incredibly wise, experienced ruler who has seen it all, done it all.
Gotcha. So regardless of whether it's literally Solomon or maybe a deeply insightful author writing as Solomon, this incredibly wise and wealthy king, he observed the world around him. What does he see in nature specifically that reinforces this idea of this fleeting, ungraspable reality? What makes him look at the world and conclude that everything is just vapor?
Oh, he finds profound evidence everywhere in nature, specifically in the ceaseless, repetitive cycles, which seem to offer no ultimate change, no genuine progress, no lasting impact. It's like observing this grand, perpetual treadmill, that just never goes anywhere new. First, he notes the cycles of generations. He says, a generation comes and a generation goes, but the earth remains forever. That's 1.4. The original Hebrew uses verb forms that emphasize continuous, uninterrupted action. It just keeps happening. And the start point seems to be that humanity, for all its individual efforts, all its striving, makes no ultimate impact on the earth. We rise, we fall, we build, we create, but the grand stage, the earth itself, remains largely indifferent, largely unchanged. That's a pretty sobering thought in our own ambition-driven world, right? Where we often strive so hard to leave a lasting legacy. Koheleth suggests maybe even that legacy eventually just fades. Then he looks up at the sun. The sun rises and the sun sets, then it hurries back to where it rises, 1.5. The verb he uses there for hastens or pants is quite vivid. It almost personifies the sun, like it's panting with fatigue from its endless, unchanging, and frankly, exhausting routine. Day after day, the sun does the same thing, same motion, never reaches a new destination. He also observes the wind. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it swirls, and back to its circuits the wind returns. 1.6. Again, this is described as continuous, uninterrupted action, a perpetual kind of futile cycle where no new direction is truly discovered. Nothing is genuinely accomplished. It just keeps swirling, always returning to where it started. And finally, the rivers. All the rivers flow into the sea, yet the sea is never filled. To the place where the rivers flow, there they flow again. 1.7. That phrase, never filled, gets repeated. And it seems to draw a direct comparison between the futility in nature's cycle and, well, human secular accomplishments. Just like the sea is never truly satisfied by the endless flow of rivers, human endeavors, no matter how vast, they never truly seem to fill that deep void of meaning. Koheleth's concluding observation in 1.8 is basically that all this natural monotony is just tiresome. No one can bear to describe it. He's implying he could list examples forever, but, well, that would be futile too.
Yeah, that nothing truly new under the sunline. From verse 9, it feels incredibly, almost uncomfortably relevant today. We live in a world that's obsessed with innovation, disruption, constant progress, new tech, new discoveries, new social structures. But is Koheleth suggesting that at some fundamental level, it's all just variations on a theme, kind of a technological or societal hevel?
That's precisely his point, I think. The academic notes we have confirm this view. They say his observation does not deny human creativity or inventiveness, only the ultimate newness of human accomplishments. Think of it like this. Compare the first voyage to the moon with, say, Columbus discovering America. Yeah, vastly different vehicles, different destinations on the map, but in terms of the fundamental human endeavor exploration, expanding horizons, pushing boundaries, Koheleth would likely say it represents the same essential accomplishment. We explore, we build, we invent, but the core human drives and outcomes, in his view. They're cyclically repetitive. He observes that what exists now is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There's a cyclical nature to human history, human achievement, that ultimately prevents true ultimate newness. And maybe most sobering, he adds that we often just forget the past. There will be no remembrance of earlier things, and also of the later things, which will be, there will be no remembrance of them by those who come after. This applies to both future events and future generations. It suggests that our impact, no matter how grand or groundbreaking it feels right now, might eventually just fade into oblivion. It forces us, I think, in this modern age of constant updates and planned obsolescence to really consider, is our endless pursuit of the next big thing truly yielding lasting foundational newness? Or is it just more sophisticated versions of what's already been done? Kohelet's grand experiment, seeking satisfaction beyond wisdom.
Okay, so if external achievements, like grand building projects, even the cycles of nature, are ultimately hevel, fleeting vapor, then what about internal pursuits? Kohelet was famous for his great wisdom. Surely that brought him lasting satisfaction. Or was it just another dead end in his relentless search for meaning?
That's a fantastic question, and it's exactly where his systematic experiment really kicks into gear. Initially, he says he decided to carefully and thoroughly examine all that has been accomplished on Earth, using wisdom as his tool. 1.13. He really applied his mind, as the text says, to gain wisdom. He became, as it emphasizes, the wisest man in the history of Jerusalem. He threw himself into deep study, relentless intellectual exploration. But his conclusion about wisdom alone, presented in 1.18, it's striking, and maybe counterintuitive for us today, since we often value knowledge so highly. He says, "For with great wisdom comes great frustration. Whoever increases his knowledge merely increases his heartache." He found that wisdom itself was also futile, 1.1 in Aro, another form of hevel. It led to distress. He says it was like chasing the wind. The key insight here seems to be that wisdom in isolation didn't alleviate his sense of futility. It actually seemed to magnify it. It made him more acutely aware of the problems, the paradoxes of life, not less. It amplified his existential angst. Wisdom itself became a source of frustration.
Wow. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially for anyone dedicating their life to learning, like, so many people in our modern knowledge economy. So if pure intellectual pursuit didn't satisfy him, then he pivots pretty dramatically, almost predictably maybe, from wisdom to pleasure, right? This sounds strikingly like a modern pursuit of happiness, trying everything, from endless partying to collecting stuff, just trying to find fulfillment somewhere.
Exactly. And it's a very systematic, intentional shift. It really is presented as an empirical experiment. He thought to himself, "Come now, I will try self-indulgent pleasure to see if it is worthwhile." 2.1. The Hebrew verb used there implies a deliberate test or experiment. He's not just casually indulging, he's putting pleasure itself to a rigorous, almost scientific test to see if it yields anything truly lasting. And he explored various forms of pleasure, leaving no stone unturned. First, he tried partying and laughter. I said of partying, it is folly, and of self-indulgent pleasure, it accomplishes nothing. 2.2. The term used for laughter here implies something like frivolous merrymaking, often linked to excessive banqueting and drinking. It's distinct from healthy, genuine joy. So the endless parties, the superficial celebrations, the constant chase for fleeting highs, he found them utterly empty. They gave no lasting profit. Then he moved on to wine. I thought deeply about the effects of indulging myself with wine, and then he adds this interesting parenthetical. All the while my mind was guiding me with wisdom and the effects of behaving foolishly. Why? So that I might discover what is profitable for people to do on earth during the few days of their lives. So this wasn't about just getting drunk or losing control. His wisdom was actively guiding this experiment, letting him dispassionately assess the effects of self-indulgence. And that phrase, few days, again emphasizes the brevity of life, adding this urgent, almost desperate edge to his quest for what is truly profitable in such a short existence.
And then the massive scale of his material accomplishments, of the building projects, acquiring vast wealth, collecting everything imaginable. This truly sounds like the ultimate capitalist dream, maybe, the pursuit of success and accumulation on a scale that many in the modern world can certainly relate to, even if they can't achieve it themselves. Did that bring him lasting joy or meaning?
He literally embarked on an unprecedented scale of great works or projects, yeah. The text emphasizes this with repeated verbs like to increase and to accomplish. He spared no expense, left no desire unfulfilled, leveraging his seemingly unlimited royal resources to the absolute maximum. He built this empire of luxury. He constructed houses and planted vineyards, 2.4. These weren't just modest places, but grand royal constructions, likely huge. He designed royal gardens and parks, planting all kinds of fruit trees, 2.5. The notes clarified these were extensive orchards, not just simple vegetable plots, signaling a real commitment to luxury and grand cultivation. He engineered and built pools to irrigate his flourishing trees, 2.6. That was an enormous feat back then, ensuring the success of his huge agricultural projects. He acquired massive numbers of male and female slaves, including homeborn slaves, 2.7, signifying this inherited, ever-growing workforce needed to maintain his empire. He amassed silver and gold from kingdoms and provinces, specifically called his personal property or valued treasures of kings, 2.8. So this wasn't just state money, but his personal private fortune. Immense individual wealth. He acquired male and female singers and a harem of beautiful concubines, 2.8, emphasizing what gives a man sensual delight. The notes explain concubines were legal property, but with elevated status, further highlighting how he indulged in every form of pleasure, status, symbol, and sensual gratification available. And that phrase, for myself, gets repeated 8 times in verses 4 through 8. It really underscores that he denied himself no acquisition, indulging every single desire, given his unlimited royal resources. He truly amassed everything that ancient society considered the absolute pinnacle of success, luxury, and power.
Okay, so after all this immense effort, this unparalleled indulgence, this massive accumulation, literally having everything money and power could possibly buy, what was his final verdict? What did he conclude about this huge experiment in worldly satisfaction?
He sums it up really powerfully, and with this clear sense of detached reflection in verse 10. I did not restrain myself from getting whatever I wanted. I did not deny myself anything that would bring me pleasure. So all my accomplishments gave me joy. This was my reward for all my effort. He admits there was indeed a temporary joy or reward, a fleeting sense of satisfaction maybe in the moment of acquisition or completion, a brief hit of pleasure. But then comes the profound pivot in verse 11, the ultimate sobering conclusion of his grand experiment. Yet, when I reflected on everything I had accomplished and on all the effort that I had expended to accomplish it, I concluded, all these achievements and possessions are ultimately profitless like chasing the wind. There is nothing gained from them on earth. That word profitless, hevel again, is put in clear parallelism with profit, advantage, gain, which is yitron in Hebrew. It means there's no ultimate benefit to be gained from secular human achievement, even if there are some relative temporary benefits along the way. And the toil, amal, that he emphasizes throughout this section. It just underscores the sheer burden, the weariness of his labor, which ultimately yielded no lasting fulfillment. The key insight for us here, maybe, is that the more you accumulate, the more acutely you might feel the emptiness. That pursuit of limitless acquisition, which often defines success in our modern world, can ironically leave us feeling just as empty as Koheleth did after his colossal experiment. It's a reminder that true, enduring satisfaction often lies beyond just material gain. 3. Wisdom versus folly and the universal fate.
Okay, so if pleasure and massive material possessions are ultimately hevel, ultimately vapor, what about that initial pursuit? Wisdom versus outright folly. Surely wisdom, knowledge itself, is inherently better. Doesn't it offer some sort of lasting advantage?
Koheleth certainly affirms that, yeah. On a practical earthly level, he says, wisdom is preferable to folly, just as light is preferable to darkness. 2.13. He uses really vivid, intuitive imagery to make this clear. The wise man can see where she is going, but the fool walks in darkness. 2.13. When he talks about the eye here, it's like a metaphor for mental and spiritual faculties. Wisdom grants clarity, foresight, the ability to navigate life's complexities more effectively. A wise person has perception, can anticipate problems, makes better decisions, while a fool just blunders blindly, often falling into traps. So from a day-to-day, practical standpoint, wisdom offers a distinct advantage, absolutely.
There's a catch, isn't there? There's like a dark cloud hanging over this seemingly obvious advantage of wisdom. It sounds like he quickly bumps up against some fundamental limitation that just levels the playing field between the wise and the foolish.
You're absolutely right. He realizes very quickly that the same fate awaits them both. 2.13. And that fate, inescapably, is death. He laments this profound realization with an exclamation, ek in Hebrew, which is basically a cry of alas, an expression of deep despair. He understands that even the wisest man himself, with all his accumulated knowledge and foresight, fares no better in the end than the most ignorant fool. All the carefully gained knowledge, all the meticulous planning, all the achievements, they cannot avert this universal ultimate end. He spells this out even more strongly in 2.16. For the wise man, like the fool, will not be remembered forever. In days to come, both will be forgotten. Alas, the wise man dies just like the fool. This recognition that human memory itself is fleeting, that even great wisdom and achievement will eventually fade from remembrance, pushes him further into despair. The shared inescapable fate of death leads him to a very strong conclusion. Life itself, what is done under the sun, becomes hateful to him, 2.171. Why? Because everything, no matter how wise or foolish, eventually leads to this common inescapable end. The key takeaway for us, maybe, is that focusing purely on worldly achievement for some kind of eternal legacy It's a futile exercise. Eventually, time just erases all the marks.
And what about all those massive accomplishments and that vast wealth he piled up? All those houses, vineyards, treasures, the huge empire he built. He can't take any of it with him, can he? That seems like a particularly bitter pill to swallow after all that effort and self-indulgence.
That's precisely the core of his lament here, yeah. And it drives home the point of hevel with a sharp personal sting. In 2.1 he states it bluntly, "I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me." The way he puts it, using the Hebrew verb nuhak, it means he's forced to pass on his entire estate and the fruit of his labors to his successor when he dies. It's not a choice, it's an unavoidable surrender. And what makes it even worse, adding another layer of profound futility, is his realization in 2.1 that he doesn't know whether that person will be wise or foolish. Someone else, maybe a complete fool, will have control over all the fruits of my labor for which I had labored so wisely. This outcome, he concludes, is also futile, hevel, and a grave misfortune. So the wealth and achievements acquired through immense wisdom and effort are ultimately subject to arbitrary fate, potentially passing to some unknown, possibly unworthy inheritor. The modern parallel is pretty clear. We can spend our lives building empires or accumulating wealth, only to have our heirs maybe squander it, or our businesses dissolve, or our legacies just get forgotten. That lack of control over one's legacy after death is a profound form of hevel.
So, just to recap this part, Koheleth finds that the wisdom gained, the pleasure pursued, the wealth accumulated, basically every grand human endeavor, they all ultimately lead to the same fate: death, and then someone else gets, or maybe squanders, whatever was built. That sounds incredibly demotivating, honestly, for anyone in the modern world striving for success or legacy or even just financial security. It seems to strip away the long-term meaning from almost any human effort. 4. God's orchestration and human limitations. Given all this pervasive futility, this stark reality of death, Koheleth's observations could easily lead someone to pure nihilism, right? Just throw your hands up. But how does he then reconcile all this with the idea of God's involvement in the world? Does he just dismiss God? Or does he try to somehow integrate this divine perspective into his rather bleak observations?
Oh, he absolutely integrates it. And this is where the book takes a really fascinating turn, I think. He shifts his focus to observe God's role, particularly in the grand design of time itself. There's that famous passage, Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1 through 8, that begins with the profound statement, "For everything there is an appointed time and an appropriate time for every activity on earth." The original Hebrew word there for appointed time, ziomon, suggests a designated time, often carrying a sense of divine purpose or plan behind it. This whole section, with its poetic pairs, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot and so on, it describes this fascinating balance. On one hand, it points to God's appointed timetable for human activities, suggesting a divine master plan that we're all operating within. But on the other hand, it also includes actions whose most appropriate time is determined by men, implying there's still space for human responsibility and choice within that divine framework. So it's not pure predestination. However, despite this divine order, Koheleth emphasizes that man is ignorant of God's timing. He asks, in verse 9, "What benefit can a worker gain from his toil?" The implication seems to be that human efforts, no matter how diligent, cannot ultimately change or alter God's predetermined orchestration of events. He does acknowledge a beautiful truth in 3.011. God has made everything fit beautifully in its appropriate time. And crucially, he adds, he has also put eternity in people's hearts. We have this innate yearning, this sense of something more, something lasting. Yet the very next part of that same verse underscores our limitation. Humans cannot comprehend what God has accomplished from beginning to end. So we possess this deep, intuitive sense of eternity, this yearning for ultimate meaning, but we lack the capacity to fully grasp God's ultimate unfolding plan. This just adds to the enigmatic nature of life under the sun. We feel something bigger is at play, but we can't quite figure it out.
And this leads him to another major observation, one that still deeply troubles and divides us today. The presence of seemingly rampant injustice in a world that is supposedly orchestrated by a just and powerful God. How does Koheleth grapple with that apparent contradiction?
It's a significant tension, yeah. And he confronts it head on without really flinching. He observes wickedness in the very place where justice should be and unfairness where fairness should reign, 3.16. This blatant contradiction to what you'd expect from a divine order is unsettling, and he doesn't try to sugarcoat it at all. His internal conclusion, though, is that God will judge both the righteous and the wicked, implying there's a future time of judgment where these present imbalances and injustices will eventually be rectified. So even if justice isn't always obvious under the sun, there's a higher reckoning coming that will ultimately set things right. That's his hope anyway. But then he makes an even more deeply unsettling observation in 3.1 meet, that God allows humans to see that they are, in some sense, like animals. This isn't necessarily a demotion of humanity, but more a stark reminder of our shared, inescapable mortality. He says, "For the fate of humans and the fate of animals are the same. As one dies, so dies the other. Both have the same breath. There is no advantage for humans over animals, for both are fleeting. Both go to the same place, both come from the dust, and to dust both return." 3.19 to 20. This highlights a profound existential equality in death. Biologically, we are all temporary creatures returning to the earth we came from. All our striving, all our intelligence doesn't spare us this fundamental biological end. And then comes that crucial rhetorical question in 3.21. Who really knows if the human spirit ascends upward and the animal spirit descends into the earth? The implication is pretty clear. We don't know, not for sure. This question reinforces human limitation in comprehending the spiritual realities beyond our earthly experience. It further contributes to the enigma of life under the sun. We can speculate, we can believe, we can have faith, but we cannot know in the same way we know the sun rises.
He then seems to turn to more specific observations about human suffering and injustice, things that still resonate so powerfully today in our discussions about inequality, exploitation, victimhood. It really does feel like the more things change, the more they stay the same, even millennia later.
He really drills down into the harsh realities of human existence, showing how suffering just seems to pervade society. In chapter 4, verses 1 to 3, he observes the oppressed and their oppressors and finds himself so distressed by it all that he actually considered those who are dead and gone more fortunate than those who are still alive. 4.2. Why? Because the dead escape the relentless oppression he sees and the heartbreaking lack of any comforter for the victims. Even more starkly, in 4.3, he states that better than both is the one who has not been born and has not seen the evil things that are done on earth. That's a profound lament over the pervasive suffering caused by oppression and the apparent absence of solace or relief for those who are crushed by it. He also identifies specific, very human sources of toil that go beyond just basic necessity, revealing underlying motivations that are still very much with us today, like competitive workaholism. I also observed that all labor and skillful work come from a person's rivalry with his neighbor. This too is futile and like chasing the wind. 4.4. This is still a huge driver in modern careers, right? Status, recognition, accumulation, often born from a desire to outdo others. A pursuit he deems ultimately empty, another form of hevel. It's not about the work itself, but that competitive spirit driving it. Then there's the impoverished sluggard. The fool folds his hands and does no work and eats his own flesh. 4.5, meaning he brings ruin upon himself through laziness. This contrasts with the competitive toil, showing that inaction and laziness also lead to destruction. It's a reminder that some toil is necessary, even beneficial. And loneliness and greed. He sees this man who is all alone with no companion, he has no children nor siblings, yet there is no end to all his toil, and he is never satisfied with riches. 4.8. This person never stops to ask, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This is described as a burdensome task. It really highlights the profound futility of just accumulating vast wealth for oneself with no one to share it with, or maybe no capacity left to even enjoy it. It's a warning against isolation and endless, unshared accumulation. Finally, he notes this misfortune where God might give a man wealth but does not enable him to enjoy its fruit. Instead, a stranger enjoys it, 6.1 to 2. This could happen due to, say, bad luck or a bad business deal, 5.14, or maybe just a miserly hoarding of wealth throughout one's life, 5.1517. He even presents the stillborn child who never experiences life's evils or toils as being better off than such a rich but unhappy man because the child at least rests and avoids all the evil things.
Wow. So a really common human problem, as Kohelet sees it, is that just having wealth doesn't automatically guarantee the ability to enjoy it. It's almost like that enjoyment is a separate gift from God, one that isn't always granted alongside the riches themselves. That's a powerful insight for our consumer-driven world, for sure. Practical wisdom for living in an imperfect world. Okay, so after all these stark observations of futility, human limitations, the inherent paradoxes and challenges of life, does Kohelet offer any practical day-to-day advice for navigating it all? Does he just leave us wallowing in a sense of despair, or is there a path forward? A way to live well despite all the chaos and uncertainty?
Oh, he absolutely does, yeah. He shifts from these broad, sometimes cynical-sounding observations to more specific, better than sayings and concrete admonitions, pieces of advice, and these are often rooted in what he calls the fear of God. He provides practical wisdom for living a decent, grounded life in an imperfect world, rather than just perpetually chasing the wind. Let's look at some of these nuggets of practical wisdom. First, on vows and speech. 5.1 to 7. He advises, "Be careful what you do when you go to the temple of God. It is better to listen than to offer the sacrifice of fools." The key insight seems to be slow to speak and quick to listen when you're in God's presence. Don't make rash vows thoughtlessly made, or vows that you can't or won't actually pay. He explicitly states it is better for you not to vow than to vow and not pay it. He warns against many words and many dreams, classifying them as futile, empty talk leads nowhere. The overarching command here is pretty clear. Therefore, fear God. This reverence, this respect should guide our interactions, especially with the divine, making us thoughtful and deliberate in our words and commitments. Then, on government, 5.8 to 9. He offers this really pragmatic observation rather than like a call to revolution or something. If you see the extortion of the poor or the perversion of justice and fairness in the government, do not be astonished by the matter. Why not? For the high official is watched by a higher official, and there are higher ones over them. The produce of the land is seized by all of them, and the king himself profits from the cultivated fields. This basically describes a deeply entrenched, corrupt, hierarchical system where exploitation is just pervasive, reaching all the way down to the peasants. His advice is not to rebel, but simply not be astonished, recognizing it as a systemic, unfortunate reality under the sun. The takeaway seems to be aware of systemic injustice, sure, but don't be surprised by it or let it paralyze you. Next, on wealth and satisfaction, 5.1 to 12. He circles back to wealth, stating pretty bluntly, "The one who loves money is never satisfied with money, nor the one who loves wealth with its abundance. This also is futile. As wealth multiplies, so do those who consume it." He mentions tax collectors, employees, hangers-on. The core insight: money itself doesn't truly satisfy that deep inner longing. He paints this really relatable picture. A laborer sleeps well, whether he eats little or much, but the rich man's abundance keeps him from sleeping. The anxiety of holding onto wealth, managing it, worrying about it, can actually be a greater burden than having little. It's a powerful counter to the modern mantra that more money automatically equals more happiness.
Yet those observations feel incredibly contemporary. So many of us can relate to the pressure of performance, the allure of content acquisition, and the sheer exhaustion that can come with it. But then he offers this surprisingly positive counterpoint, almost like a balm after all that talk of futility, the value of shared labor and companionship. That seems quite different.
Yes. That's where the collaborative wisdom really comes in, and it stands in stark contrast to the futility of individual, isolated accumulation. In chapter 4, verses 9 through 12, Koheleth asserts, "Two people are better than one because they can reap more benefit from their labor." This is just a profound practical insight into the power and maybe the necessity of human cooperation. He elaborates on the benefits with these simple yet really powerful examples. Mutual support. If they fall, one will help his companion up, but pity the person who falls down and has no one to help him up. This highlights that crucial safety net, the resilience that human companionship provides when we face life's inevitable setbacks. Warmth. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they can keep warm, but how can one person keep warm by himself? This speaks to that basic human need for intimacy, comfort, shared experience, not just physically, but emotionally too. Defense. And if someone might overpower one alone, two together can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. This emphasizes strength in numbers, the power of unity against adversity, and the exponential power of collaboration. These are clear, tangible benefits to companionship and working together, contrasting sharply with that isolated individual toiling away for hevel. The key insight: shared life and shared work actually multiply your effectiveness and your resilience.
That is a powerful contrast. From the futility of individual, isolated striving to the profound, tangible benefits of collaboration and companionship. It offers a clear path for seeking meaning, not just in what you have, but in how you relate and connect with others. That feels like a bit of a lifeline in our often very isolated modern world.
Yes, exactly. And he continues to balance the ideal with reality, always acknowledging the limitations and imperfections of the world under the sun. He's never purely idealistic. Consider his observation on wisdom versus might or status. 9.1316. He tells this little illustrative story, an anecdote about a poor but wise man who lived in the city, and he could have delivered the city by his wisdom. Sounds great, right? But no one listened to that poor man. This highlights that, while yes, wisdom is better than might, in reality, a poor man's wisdom is despised. No one ever listens to his advice. It's a harsh reality check. Wisdom's value is often overlooked or undervalued if it's not accompanied by status or wealth or power. The practical insight here is that true wisdom doesn't always translate into influence or recognition. Sometimes presentation or status unfortunately outweighs substance. Then he discusses the power of words, 9.1 scene 18. The words of the wise are heard in quiet more than the shouting of a ruler is heard among fools. This suggests that quiet, thoughtful wisdom, delivered thoughtfully, might be more influential and effective in the long run than loud, foolish proclamations. However, he immediately counters this with another sobering truth. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner can destroy much that is good. The key insight. While wisdom is powerful, a single flaw, a single act of sin, or just a moment of profound foolishness can have a massive, disproportionate impact, potentially ruining an otherwise good life or a great work. It's like the rotten apple spoils the barrel phenomenon, and this leads directly into one of his most striking and somewhat paradoxical warnings, the paradox of folly, 10.1. Dead flies cause the perfumer's ointment to stink, so a little folly outweighs great wisdom and honor. That phrase outweighs means it carries more weight or is more influential. This is a really stark warning that a single slip can ruin much that is good, even a whole life of great wisdom. Just as a few dead flies can completely spoil an entire jar of expensive, fragrant ointment, a small act of foolishness, a moral lapse, or a moment of recklessness can taint or even nullify a lifetime of wise and honorable living. It's a powerful reminder for us today, I think, to guard against complacency and seemingly minor ethical compromises, because their impact can be disproportionately huge. Embracing life amidst uncertainty and impermanence.
Okay, so Koheleth has laid out the futility, the limitations, the practical challenges of life under the sun in such stark terms. He's exposed all the paradoxes. What's his ultimate kind of distilled advice for living well in this often disappointing and uncertain world? Does he offer a final comprehensive strategy for finding a meaningful existence despite all the hevel?
He does, yeah, and it's less a single, neat strategy and more a repeated call to embrace the simple, concrete aspects of life. It's not really about escaping futility, but about finding a proper response to life's fleeting nature, finding what he calls a divinely given capacity to enjoy. But first, he lays some crucial groundwork that really underpins this advice. He notes that no one is truly righteous, 7.20, for there is not one truly righteous person on the earth who continually does good and never sins. This is really crucial context for his advice on avoiding extremes later in 7.1617. Do not be excessively righteous or excessively wise. Do not be excessively wicked, and do not be a fool. The fear of God, mentioned in 7.c, seems to be the necessary balance. It prevents you from relying on your own righteousness, which is inherently flawed, and it also prevents you from just rationalizing sin. The key insight: humility before God is essential, recognizing human fallibility and avoiding both self-righteousness and reckless abandon. He also touches on the elusiveness of deep wisdom, 7.23-204. He says he tried to understand, examine, and comprehend the role of wisdom in the scheme of things, but he found it far away, and deep who can find it. This really highlights human limitation. No matter how much we study, how much we strive, the ultimate mysteries of God's work and the universe remain beyond our complete grasp. The takeaway seems to be, don't let the pursuit of ultimate understanding prevent you from actually living and enjoying the life you have right now. He includes a specific warning, primarily to men it seems, against a dangerous woman, 7.26. More bitter than death is the kind of woman who is like a hunter's snare. Her heart is like a hunter's net, and her hands are like prison chains. The man who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is captured by her. Now, this is likely a specific warning against a type of destructive, manipulative individual, someone who entraps and ruins others. It's probably not meant as a general statement about all women, but more about the danger of moral compromise and succumbing to destructive influences in relationships. He advises on obeying authority, 8.2-5. Obey the king's command because you took an oath before God to be loyal to him. He advises not to rush out of the king's presence in haste because, well, he can do whatever he pleases. The king's authority in that context was absolute. A wise person knows the proper time and procedure for everything, recognizing that the oppression of the king is severe upon his victim. This is really practical advice for survival, for navigating any hierarchical system, whether it's an ancient monarchy or maybe a modern corporation. Understand the power dynamics and proceed wisely, cautiously. He highlights human ignorance of the future, 8.7-8. Surely no one knows the future, and no one can tell another person what will happen. Just like you can't control the wind or escape death, he says, wickedness cannot rescue the wicked. The key insight: we simply cannot predict or control all outcomes, especially life's biggest ones, except that uncertainty. And finally, he confronts the enigma of life, 8.9-14. He observes wicked people receiving honor while righteous people suffer. He calls this an enigma, using hevel again, here meaning something difficult to grasp mentally. The delay in judgment for evil, he notes, emboldens the wicked, but he still affirms his belief. It will go well with those who fear God, but it will not go well with the wicked. Yet he acknowledges that life under the sun often contradicts this rule, which is why he calls it futile or enigmatic. This is a paradox we still grapple with today, right? Why do bad things happen to good people, and vice versa? His wisdom acknowledges the problem, even if it doesn't fully resolve it in earthly terms.
So after all this paradox and uncertainty, Kohelet seems to pivot towards this central recommendation that feels almost like a mantra for modern times, maybe. A way to find some peace and purpose, despite the chaos and unpredictability.
Absolutely. This is where he offers his most repeated and I think most powerful recommendation. It's like a lifeline in a world full of hevel. It's the recommendation to enjoy life. 8.15. So I recommend the enjoyment of life, for there is nothing better on earth for a person to do except to eat, drink, and enjoy life. So joy will accompany him in his toil during the days of his life which God gives him on earth. This enjoyment is crucial. It's not the same as the self-indulgent pleasure he experimented with earlier. It's presented more as a capacity or an ability to find enjoyment that is explicitly stated to be a gift from God, as seen also in 2.24, 26, 5.18. The key insight. True contentment isn't found in what you gain, but in the appreciation of simple, tangible blessings within the fleeting nature of existence. It's about finding satisfaction in the here and now, in the basic rhythms of life. He reiterates human limitations and comprehension, 8.17, right after this call to enjoyment. Even with great effort to gain wisdom and observe the world, Kohelet discerns that no one really comprehends what happens on earth. It's deep. Deep, he says, and despite all human efforts, no one can ever grasp it. The takeaway: maybe stop trying to figure it all out. Accept life as it is, with its inherent mysteries. Don't allow the endless search for ultimate understanding to prevent you from truly enjoying the present moment. He powerfully tells us to embrace life's joys, 9.7-9. Go, eat your food with joy, and drink your wine with a happy heart, because God has already approved your works. 9.7. This is a call to live fully, with gratitude, knowing that simple, everyday pleasures are okay, even sanctioned by God. Let your clothes always be white, and do not spare precious ointment on your head. 9.8. These were ancient symbols of celebration and joy, like wear your best clothes, use the good perfume, live festively. It's an encouragement to treat every day, maybe, as an occasion for joy. Enjoy life with your beloved wife during all the days of your fleeting life that God has given you on earth during all your fleeting days, for that is your reward in life and in your burdensome work on earth. That repetition of fleeting, hevel, just emphasizes life's brevity, making the enjoyment of companionship and loving relationships even more precious. The ultimate insight seems to be, true reward lies in shared human connection and savoring those relationships while you can. And this call to joy is paired with a fierce insistence on diligence in the present. 9.0. Whatever you find to do with your hands, do it with all your might, because there is neither work nor planning nor knowledge nor wisdom in the grave, the place where you will eventually go. This is a powerful, urgent call to seize the day, carpe diem, right? To act with vigor and commitment while you have the opportunity, because death brings an absolute end to all earthly activity. The core takeaway: don't procrastinate on living fully or working diligently, because your time is finite.
Okay, so diligence and enjoyment are key. But even with wisdom and hard work, there's still that unpredictable element of chance, isn't there? It seems like Kohelet is profoundly realistic about the limitations of human control. Almost like a stark reminder that even our best efforts can't guarantee the outcomes we want.
Yes, he is profoundly realistic about those external factors beyond our control. Absolutely. Kohelet observes that the race is not always won by the swiftest. The battle is not always won by the strongest. Prosperity does not always belong to those who are the wisest, nor wealth to those who have the most discernment, nor favor to those who have the most skill. 9.11. Instead, he says, time and chance happen to them all. Humans get caught like fish in an evil net, or birds in a snare and snared at an unfortunate time, 9.12. This is a really humbling truth, especially for our often meritocratic societies. Effort and talent don't guarantee success. Luck, unforeseen circumstances, just plain timing, they play a significant role. The core insight: recognize and accept that despite your best efforts, some things are simply out of your control. And this understanding of ignorance of the future demands diligence, 11.1-6. Because we don't know the future, he gives this practical, almost businesslike advice. Send your grain overseas, for after many days you will get a return. Divide your merchandise among 7 or even 8 investors, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on earth, 11.1-2. This is basically a pragmatic business strategy for an uncertain world. Diversify your risks, because you can't predict economic downturns or natural disasters or whatever else might happen. He continues to reinforce human ignorance about ultimate processes. Just as you do not know the path of the wind or how the bones form in the womb of a pregnant woman, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. 11.5. This powerfully reinforces our limitations in comprehending divine processes and the deep mysteries of life itself. We can't grasp the grand design, just like we can't fully understand how biological development happens. Therefore, his conclusion is pragmatic and actionable. Sow your seed in the morning, and do not stop working until the evening, for you do not know which activity will succeed, whether this one or that one, or whether both will prosper equally. 11.6. That phrase, morning to evening, is a figure of speech, a merism, meaning work diligently all day long, continuously. This is a call to persistent effort despite the unknown outcomes. You don't know which endeavor will yield fruit, so you have to work at all of them, maybe, all the time. The key takeaway: work hard and diversify your efforts, because you can't control which one ultimately pays off.
Yeah.
So the imperative seems to be embrace life's joys fully, act diligently in whatever you do, precisely because life is short and we don't know the future. It's a very active, present-focused approach to living, even right in the face of all that uncertainty.
Exactly. He pulls these threads together beautifully in the final chapters. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for a person to see the sun. 11.7. Light here is pretty clearly a metaphor for life. Life itself is a sweet thing, something to be savored and appreciated. So if a man lives many years, let him rejoice in them all, but let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that is about to come is obscure. Days of darkness refer to old age and eventually death. The future is obscure. There's that hevel idea again, enigmatic, unclear. The core insight: enjoy life now, appreciate every moment you have, but always with the sober awareness of its finite nature and the coming end. Don't live in denial of mortality. He gives a direct charge to youth, 11.9 to 10. Rejoice, young man, while you are young, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes. But then the crucial qualifier: but know that God will judge your motives and actions. So this isn't a license for just reckless abandon. It's an encouragement to enjoy life's vitality within moral boundaries, always mindful of divine judgment. He urges, banish emotional stress from your mind and put away pain from your body, for youth and the prime of life are fleeting. Enjoy life, embrace your energy, but do it with a sense of accountability. Finally, in this deeply poetic and sobering passage, 12.1 to 7, he delivers the reminder of old age and death. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, 12.1. This means obey God, acknowledge his lordship before physical decline sets in. It's presented as the ultimate preventative measure against a life ending in regret. Do this before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no pleasure in them, 12.1. He uses these vivid, almost visceral metaphors for physical decline. When those who keep watch over the house, your arms begin to tremble, and the virile men, your legs begin to stoop over, and the grinding women, your teeth stop because they are few, and those who look through the windows, your eyes see dimly. And the doors to the street are shut your ears, and the sound of the mill is faint chewing, and one awakens at the sound of a bird's sleep loss, and all the daughters of song you're hearing grow quiet. 12.3 to 4. It's this gradual, sad progression of losing faculties. He speaks of fears of heights, dangers on the road, 12.5. White hair as the almond tree blossoms, limping as the grasshopper drags itself along, failing desire as the caperberry no longer works. Man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets, and it culminates in the description of the final, irrefutable collapse of death. Before the silver cord snaps and the golden bowl is broken and the jar is smashed at the spring and the wheel is broken at the cistern and the dust returns to the earth as it was and the spirit returns to God who gave it. 12.6 to 7. This vividly describes the body's disintegration, its return to dust, and the spirit's return to its maker. The key insight is simple and profound. Death is inevitable. It's the ultimate equalizer. Live in light of that reality. 7. Concluding wisdom and the final charge.
Wow. Okay, so after leading us through such a deep and yet at times pretty somber reflection on life's futility, its inevitability, the ephemeral nature of all human striving, how does Koheleth finally wrap up his grand message? What's the ultimate takeaway for us? As we try to make sense of our own lives right now in the modern age, surrounded by so much noise and so many competing definitions of success.
Well, Koheleth, the teacher, he actually steps back in verses 9 and 10 of chapter 12, and he describes his own rigorous methods. It's like he's reinforcing the deliberate, authoritative nature of his teachings. He wants to assure us he wasn't just idly musing or sharing random thoughts. He studiously weighed and carefully evaluated Proverbs, applying deep thought and discernment to everything he observed. He then compiled and arranged them, suggesting a systematic, well-ordered approach to wisdom. Furthermore, he sought to find pleasant words, but crucially, he wrote accurately words of truth. This means his message is intended to be not only well-considered and ordered, but also presented in an engaging and truthful way. It's like a testament to the rigorous process behind the wisdom he shared, underscoring its reliability.
Okay. And then, after all that rigorous inquiry, that immense personal experiment, the careful compilation of his observations, he delivers what feels like the ultimate warning, and then the distilled final conclusion. What is that definitive anchoring charge?
Yes, he gives a final warning first, in 12.12. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. There is no end to the making of many books, and much study is exhausting to the body. This seems to be a caution against endless, perhaps unguided accumulation of knowledge without practical application or a central guiding principle, the key insight. While books and study are valuable, an obsessive, aimless pursuit of knowledge can be wearying and ultimately might not lead to the fundamental truth he's been seeking. It's a pretty relevant warning for our information-saturated age, isn't it? Where we can endlessly consume content without ever really distilling wisdom or applying it. More data doesn't automatically mean more wisdom or less exhaustion. Then he delivers the profound distilled conclusion in 12.13. This is the summation of all his philosophical wandering, his existential inquiry. It's the anchor that holds everything else in place. Having heard everything, I have reached this conclusion. Fear God and keep his commandments, because this is the whole duty of man. This is presented as the ultimate true wisdom that transcends all the futility observed under the sun. Fearing God here implies a deep reverence, obedience, living in light of his sovereignty and ultimate judgment. It puts all the futility, all the hevel he's meticulously described, into perspective. It grounds human purpose and meaning, not in fleeting earthly achievements, but in a profound relationship with the divine. It is the solid ground in a world of shifting sands. And the reason why this is the sum of man's duty is given right there in the final verse, 12.12. For God will evaluate every deed, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. This underscores that while justice might be delayed or seem contradictory under the sun, a final reckoning by God is certain. This divine judgment provides the ultimate accountability and meaning, making every action, every choice significant, even if its earthly impact seems fleeting or meaningless. It offers a kind of solution to the problem of injustice and provides ultimate purpose to what Koheleth observed as a chaotic and often unfair world. It gives lasting meaning, he suggests, to everything we do.
What an incredible deep dive into Ecclesiastes. Seriously. We started with futile, everything is futile. That Hebrew phrase, hevel describing life as this elusive vapor. And we're ending with this profound anchoring command to fear God and keep his commandments. It's a truly remarkable arc of human experience, right? From almost existential despair to a clear path for living.
It truly is, yeah. The teacher, Koheleth, he doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of life at all. Its brevity, the limits of our knowledge, the fleeting nature of pleasure and wealth, the absolute inevitability of death. He lays bare all the paradoxes and injustices under the sun with unflinching honesty, forcing us, the readers, to confront them too.
But within that stark reality, within all that hevel, all that vapor, he carves out this remarkably practical path for a meaningful existence. He encourages us not to despair, but actually to embrace the simple joys, good food, a satisfying drink, the warmth of companionship, diligence in our work, and importantly, not as an escape from futility, but as a divinely given capacity, a gift to be savored right here, right now.
Yes, exactly. And this enjoyment, it's not presented as some hedonistic pursuit, but one undertaken with that underlying awareness of God's sovereignty and ultimate judgment. That really seems to be the ancient wisdom for modern days. Recognizing our finite nature, recognizing the profound uncertainties of life, while actively choosing joy, working diligently in the present moment, and maintaining reverence for the divine. Knowing that true, lasting meaning isn't ultimately found in what we accumulate, but maybe in how we live, how we connect with others, and most importantly, who we acknowledge as our creator and ultimate judge.
So, as you go about your day, maybe navigating your own pursuits, your own challenges, the constant striving of modern life, consider Koheleth's profound words. How does understanding the futility, the hevel of much human endeavor actually free you up to truly savor the simple, divinely given good moments in your own fleeting life? And how does that ultimate perspective, the perspective of divine judgment, shape your actions, even the secret ones, in a world where visible justice often seems so absent? That's a question worth pondering, I think, long after this deep dive ends.
Believer talks, let's take a look. Life and hope in every book.